Ramachandra from the NR Hour Sports Show. This is episode 769, joined by a really special guest, three-time Super Bowl champ from the San Francisco 49ers, Randy Cross. He played center, guard position. He went to UCLA for college. Man, truly a fantastic career, awesome career. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for joining the show. It's truly an honor. And how are you and your family doing so far during the tough situation?
Oh, we're doing just fine. We live down in Georgia, so it hasn't exactly been locked down here, at least, gosh, since last April or so. So it's been fine. Been doing a lot of traveling. I was up in New York last week for some draft shows, and out in Portland and San Francisco and some other places that are a little bit more uptight. But down here, it's been loosened up for a while.
Yeah, two more days till the draft. So we're going to talk about that obviously later on. But I want to get to your career first. But before that, I want to give a quick birthday shout out to Amy Trask. We had her on the show last month, and she's amazing to talk to. And I just want to give her a quick birthday shout out. So.
Oh yeah, she is. She's pretty amazing. Yeah. She was amazing. She was great to deal with when she was working with Al and the Raiders. She was a sort of a ray of sanity and a sea of craziness in that Raider building.
Yeah, so I want to ask you about your childhood real quick. And when did you start get interested in playing sports? And before deciding on football, did you play any other sports back in the day?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was born in Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, and we lived in Brooklyn, not too far from Ebbets Field. So I was a big baseball fan from hell as early as I can remember. So that's the sport I played right almost exclusively till I was about till my freshman year, till I was 14, 15 years old. So that was my game. I'm still a huge Dodger fan and love baseball. I'm down here in Atlanta now, so kind of my team two is Atlanta, and they're also been kind of fun to watch. But I didn't really start playing football until ninth grade. And the only reason I started playing football at all was my dad had insisted that I go to a Catholic all-boys high school, transfer from public schools in LA over to this Catholic all-boys school. And I was very, very much against it, to put it lightly. And then he said, well, you're going to do it. And if you're going to do it, go off for football. He said, you've only got like 100 guys in your freshman class. And over half of them are going to be going out for football. So you'll get to know most of the guys you're going to school with. So that was his rationale. And it worked out. And I haven't kind of looked back since then.
Huh. So for you, did you have like any role models, like a role model growing up in the NFL while working on your craft?
Not crazy. I mean, my favorite non-quarterback was Merlin Olsen when I was a kid. I didn't play offense much in high school. I played defensive line and like a stand-up outside linebacker kind of a thing sometimes. And yeah, I mean, and that's not unusual. If you talk to a lot of guys that played, college and pro offensive line, a lot of guys started out as defensive linemen and ended up on the offensive line. And it served me well. It really did. And it was a fun time. I had a blast in high school, and then I got to stay in LA when I went to UCLA.
So let me ask you, I'm just curious. So how was that transition, like moving from defense to offensive line and guard and center? Was it a hard transition for you, or just like a easy transition?
Well, in high school, it was kind of, it's, high school, you don't have that many guys. So a lot of you have to go both ways. And, I figured if I didn't have to go both ways, I could go a lot harder on defense. So one of my best friends was the guy that played behind me. So he got to play on offense. So it was a win-win. But, playing versatility can be kind of a double-edged sword. My freshman year, I played center. My sophomore year, I played center. My junior year, I played guard. And my senior year, I played guard and center. because we had 2 offensive lines. We had 9 guys, all of whom eventually got some sort of shot NFL wise. And we had 1 line, and I was the right guard on that line. And then we played 2 series or so, and then we put in the next line, and I was the center on that line. So, it's good to be versatile. And, Terry Donahue, my old offensive line coach, and Bob McKittrick, another UCLA-based guy who coached with Tommy Prothro, and Steve Butler, who was my high school line coach, they were all connected to UCLA. Butler and Donahue played on the 66 Rose Bowl team. But all 3 of those coaches are kind of the guys I owe my careers to, especially Terry. More than anything, kind of getting it through my thick skull that I could actually, go into the NFL and make a living playing this game. He's a guy that, suggested I play center. He's the guy that suggested I learn how to long snap. And I did that 12 of my 13 years. So yeah, didn't get that extra snap money though, for some reason. They weren't too willing to pay that extra money for that. But yeah, it was the versatility thing can come back to at times to kind of bite you in the butt. Because, people like I did a Miller Lite commercial when I finished playing football. And, on that commercial, it says ex All Pro center. And when I saw that initially on the font, I asked the director, I said, that's not right. And he looked at me like, what? And then he looked over at the ad agency. And I said, yeah, I was All Pro at guard several times. And I was like 2nd team All Pro or so at center one time, I think, and All NFC and things like that. But, I was never an ex All Pro center. And he looks at him and he looks at me and he looks at the screen. He goes, let's see, this is Hollywood. Did you play or did you not play center? I said, yeah, 3.5 of my 13 years. He goes, were you or were you not All Pro? I said, yes, I was at guard. He goes, fine, that's semantics. You're an All Pro center. Use it. Go ahead. But because of that, an alarmingly large number of people kind of think I played center most of my career. And I don't mean fans. I mean people that actually cover the game and supposedly know something about the game. Or they always say, "Oh, you were a great center." I was like, "Yeah, I was a pretty good center. I was a lot better guard, but I was a pretty good center." And the versatility is something I tell kids all the time that are playing different sports. Play different sports, and if you play each individual sports, learn to do other things, learn other skills. If you're playing hoops and you're a power forward or a center or something, learn how to dribble. Get your handles going. If you're a baseball player and you're a catcher or outfielder, take infield practice, do that kind of stuff. Learn a couple pitches, learn how to catch. Just do different things, because I think it really rounds out your sort of your skill and a lot of your value to your team. It's not real popular these days. Everybody wants to focus and specialize. They all want to be a specialist.
Yeah, you were a four-time all first time. You were a 4-time first team all NFC. It's all NFC East.
NFC West, actually.
Yeah, and then two-time second team. There was.
Yeah. And so the guards and the centers, and I look down at my bio all the time. Either Wikipedia or somebody, and I go, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. And then I look at some of the groups. All Pro, Professional Football Writers Association, which I don't even think they have one of those anymore, at least professional. So it's fun. When it all gets down to it. I mean, we were so bad my first 5 years. Mm-hmm. It was pretty nice to actually be worth a damn for the last 8.
Yeah. So take me back to your recruiting process. How many offers did you have coming out of high school, and what made you choose UCLA?
I had a bunch. Yeah, I mean, whatever. My idea of a bunch. I had about 25 or 30. My final group was Notre Dame, of course, because I went to a Catholic school. Notre Dame, Nebraska, who was the defending national champion, Alabama, Texas, Stanford, and UCLA. Got accepted to Stanford. Couldn't lie to Notre Dame. I was on a phone call with Coach Parsegian. They were going to set up a recruiting trip, and I just came out and said it. I said, Coach, I just spent 4 years in a Catholic all-boys school, because back then Notre Dame was all boys. You had St. Mary's across the way. I said, I ain't doing that again. Nothing personal. I don't want to do that. So they were kind of out. Nebraska was really hard to say no to, because Dr. Tom Osborne was the offensive coordinator back then. He recruited me to Nebraska, and one of the finest people I've ever met associated with sports. But Alabama I was an LA kid, so Alabama, going down there didn't seem like it'd be a real good idea to me. And then Texas was offering me a dual scholarship, track and football, because I threw the shot. And at that point, I thought I wanted to do both, mainly because if I threw the shot, I didn't have to go to spring football, which I thought sounded like a really good idea. But UCLA offered me kind of a dual scholarship too, and I say kind of, because football said yes, you can go out for track, and I did it my freshman year and gave that a shot, and I did all right, threw it about 60 feet, and I just didn't want to get in. I hated weightlifting, like hated weightlifting with a passion. Like never lifted weights. Didn't lift weights in high school. Didn't lift weights in college. Didn't really start lifting weights until my second year in the NFL.
Wow.
Only because my first year in the NFL, I found out why guys lifted so much weight, because it's a lot easier to deal with adults if you have strength. And I didn't have much strength. I had natural strength, and that's still pretty good. But the whole college experience, my idea of a great off-season workout was to go to Poly Pavilion and play a couple games of volleyball, 2-man volleyball, and then go over and play some hoops, and get your cardio right and be in great condition, and then go play football.
So what was it like for you playing for UCLA, the home team, and playing in front of those fans? What was that like, that feeling?
It was amazing. It was amazing. But back then, both teams, both SC and UCLA, played at the Coliseum. So it was always that scheduling where one of them had to be out of town and all that. But no, it was fantastic. I had been raised a UCLA fan, so I got recruited by SC, but I really wasn't. I wasn't that crazy about the idea of going to SC, because I just wasn't really a fan. Excuse me, but going to UCLA the school was fantastic. The people were fantastic. The athletic department, I mean, heck, we won the NCAA in hoops. I think 3 of the 4 years I was there. We had, we were 9-2 my freshman year. Had a pretty damn good team. 8-3 the other second year. My third year, which was, because I had 2 years of Pepper Rogers and 2 years of Dick Vermeil. So after 2 years, Pepper took the job at Georgia Tech. He left, and they hired Dick Vermeil. And we were okay my junior year. Then my senior year, we won the Rose Bowl. We won the Pac, well, back then, Pac-8, to date myself. We won the Pac-8, and then we won the Rose Bowl against Ohio State, who was number 1, that had beaten us pretty bad earlier in the year.
So for you, what were the main things that you learned as a college football player in UCLA from your coaching staff and your teammates that got you ready for the NFL?
It might sound like cliches, but it was the value of getting off the ball, the value of low man wins, the value of technique. I had always been raised in football and in track, just drilled into my head about the value of technique. and how you block and how you throw the shot and how you do that. So, I mean, if there was one thing I took away between high school and college, it was that. It was, how that really goes a long, long way. It's kind of like, Bill Walsh was a huge boxing fan. And he'd always have the analogy where he'd be shadow boxing over there. And then later on, you knew you were going to get a boxing analogy during one of his talks. Mm-hmm. And, he'd talk about, when you watch a fight, he goes, watch boxing. It looks like they're both hitting each other with those jabs at the same time. He says, but one of those guys is just imperceptibly quicker than the other one. He goes, you can't see it in the first round. You probably can't even see it on the third, fourth, fifth round. Because you get about halfway through the fight though, and suddenly that guy that's hitting him that much quicker, now that's about a half a foot quicker. And the guy's not getting his punch off anymore because he's getting smacked in the face. And his whole philosophy, not to say that was all, but he talks about that as being the most important thing. Because you got to do that. You got to be the first one to strike. And that was something I took with me. Used to do it in college, did it through the pros. And, when I finally, got off my butt and started lifting weights, the combination of the technique and the quickness and everything else, along with being fairly strong, worked out really well.
So I want to ask you about your draft experience. Obviously, you got drafted in 1976, round 2, pick 42 with the 49ers, and you got to stay near home throughout your whole career. So take me back to the draft experience. What was that like, getting the call from the 49ers?
Yeah, I got to stay at least in my home state. I got a phone call that morning, and remember, this wasn't the big production. The commissioner Pete Rozelle wasn't hugging everybody.
Right.
It was on basically the radio. It wasn't even on TV. Nothing about it was on TV. It'd be in the paper the next morning, but it was on the radio. And I was sitting in my parents' kitchen in their house in Tarzana, California, next to one of those wall phones.
Right.
That has that like 10-foot cord on the handle. I was sitting on that. Wow. Making some phone calls, talking to friends. Right towards the end of the first round, Cleveland called, and they said they were going to draft me with I think they had the 24th pick, I think, of the first round. And like a dumbass I was at that time, the coach who used to be the coach at Cal State Northridge, a guy named Rod Humanick, he says something about, how do you feel about Cleveland and being a Cleveland Brown? And first thing came to mind, I shouldn't have said. I went, Cleveland, like Ohio? It snows there a lot, doesn't it? Not real smart. So needless to say, they didn't consider drafting me at that spot. For them, it was great. They drafted a fullback out of Purdue named Mike Pruitt, who played for them about 8 or 9 years and had a great career. But then San Francisco drafted me. Monty Clark was the coach that year, and he had been the offensive line coach for the great Dolphin teams, the undefeated teams and all that. So another guy that valued highly the whole idea of technique and how you block and deal with defensive players. So it was a fun experience. It was totally different. They flew me up the night of the draft. They flew me to the Bay Area, and I showed up. I had on a Hawaiian shirt, jeans, and a pair of flip-flops, and I had hair down to about here. And I walked in, and they were like, "Oh, Jesus!
Oh man!"
Everybody's looking at Monty like, "Are you crazy? You drafted this guy?" And I don't blame him. But it worked out good for me. But we did. There was no pre-draft combine at that point. The only thing I had ever done was run a 40. There was no strength test, no nothing. I ran a 40, and back at that point, it was right before my senior year spring football, and I ran like a 4.75 or a 4.8 40, which was pretty good for a lineman. And so I get drafted, and they're making us do bench press reps at 2 1/4, and they want us to do pull-ups and chin-ups. and I started with pull-ups and chin-ups. I think I did 2 pull-ups and 1 chin-up. Because I had never done it. I got on the bench to do 225. I got 2 reps at 225.
Wow.
So yeah. I mean, there are kickers now that do 20 reps. So I'm glad I didn't do that these days. But then I went out and ran a real fast 40. So I kind of saved both our butts. Because Monty wasn't real happy with me.
What was your 40 time?
475.
Wow. Okay. That's really good. So it's obviously that the things you said to Cleveland were horrible, but are you kind of grateful that you said that, because your career ended up in a awesome way? You got 3 Super Bowl rings. So are you kind of grateful that you said that?
Well, eventually it did. I mean, they were pretty good through the early part of my career. So I kind of was bummed, because we blew. Mm-hmm. My rookie year, we were 8-6. Then we were 5-9. Then they went to the 16-game schedule, and the next 2 years we were both 2-14.
Wow.
So then 6-10, and then we won the Super Bowl. So those of us, and there were several of us that were, especially on the offensive line, but probably overall about 7 or 8 guys, really had a point of reference when it came time for us to, hoist a Lombardi, because we knew what it was to really suck. And because we were really bad, those 2-14 teams. One of them, the 78 team, might have been the worst team in the history of the league, football wise. And I tell people all the time, the 79 team, Bill Walsh's first year, might have been the best 2-14 team ever, because we scored like 30 something points a game. Wow. We just couldn't stop anybody. We lost games 48-35, stuff like that. Yeah.
So for you, obviously, before we get to the 3 Super Bowl runs, I want to ask you, you played with a lot of great players throughout your career. I want to get to 2 players though you played with: Jim Plunkett, a quarterback, and another quarterback you played with, Joe Montana, at some point in your career. So what was it like playing with those 2 quarterbacks and helping them and being their offensive lineman?
Yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of Plunkett. That's one of the reasons I almost went to Stanford, where those great Super Bowl teams, or those great Rose Bowl teams that John Ralston had at Stanford. Mm-hmm. And any place that had a group of linemen they called the Thunder Chickens, I was all about that. I thought that was a great idea. I wanted to be a Thunder Chicken. But Plunk was fantastic. He was even fantastic at New England, but he played for a coach in Chuck Fairbanks that insisted on running down the line option plays in the NFL, which back then was really not a good idea. And I think Plunk had 2 or 3 shoulder surgeries and knee surgery. Then he got drafted by us, and we were kind of a ragtag offensive line between young guys and old guys. So he got beat up pretty bad his first couple of years with us. And by the time Joe Thomas cut him, I think would have been 70, training camp of 78, I think. Al Davis signed him right away with the Raiders. And he basically spent that year healing. Al just said, "Hey, look, I'm not looking for you to play. I got Kenny Stabler. I want you just to get healthy." And, the rest speaks for itself, because, he wins the Super Bowl. He wins 2 more Super Bowls for the Raiders. Both the one they won down in Tampa, and then the other one they won against the Eagles down in New Orleans. He was an amazing quarterback. And then Joe, when he showed up, it didn't take, exactly a West Coast offense rocket scientist to figure out this guy was pretty good. And his skill set matched perfectly with what Bill Walsh wanted to do, which sounds really obvious. When you look at it, even today, you see teams will draft guys and you go, well, you know what? He doesn't do really what they want.
Right.
And people just, I guess they expect and have always expected for the player to adjust. Well, wouldn't the easiest way be that, instead of the player having to adjust, you maybe adjust what you do to them while they're learning? And that's something, give NFL a lot of credit over the last 10 years or so. They've really done that with their offenses. They've modernized, in relation to the college game. A lot of that stuff, the spread stuff, has come up into the NFL, and and you'll see college quarterbacks now come in and be pretty effective.
Right.
Sure, they're NFL defenses, so the windows, instead of being like this, are like that. And the linemen, instead of being 6'5", 275 at some positions, or 6'5", 300, or 6'6", 340, or, they're just bigger and faster and stronger. But the good news is, if you're a young quarterback now, you have the advantage. It's no longer open season on quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. Quarterbacks aren't treated like, somebody just tied a ribeye to your neck and the wolves are coming after you, because it used to be pretty brutal what they got away with doing to quarterbacks. And I know even a guy, that's what made protecting Joe so important, because you didn't take long to figure, looking at his little skinny self, that you couldn't let people, just hit him constantly. Right. That wasn't going to work out really well. And, he's a guy that, for instance, I think it was 85, our opening game in Tampa, he blows a disc out in his back. And maybe 83, but he blows a disc out in his back, and he's out for like 8 weeks, but he comes back he blows it out in the opening game, and he comes back 7-8 weeks later. Wow. Now, he was like 195 before. He was about 180 when he came back, because he couldn't lift, couldn't do a lot of stuff, but he did normal rehab and whatnot. And I remember the first meeting we had the week that he was actually going to play was one of the few times Bill Walsh ever came into our meeting room. He comes in, closes the door, and he looks at us and he says, "You can't allow anybody to breathe on him. They can't touch him." He goes, "I don't care if you clip them. I don't care if you tackle them. I don't care what you do. Pull them down by their hair, pull them down by their helmet. They can't touch Joe. I'll take the penalty. Just, you can't let them touch Joe." Which was like, hey, carte blanche, can do whatever we want until the game started. Then you'd actually lose somebody and come back and clip them or something, and it'd get called, and Bill would just go off. "What are you thinking? But you said," "What do you mean? I wasn't serious." But yeah, that was playing with Joe was special. It was I've always described it as an unfair advantage, because guys like he and Ronnie and Jerry, specifically those guys, and even Roger Craig when he was playing, they were kind of generation skippers. They were doing stuff that other people weren't doing. And you really learn to appreciate it. And especially, like for Joe, you'd break the huddle at the end of the game. If you had the ball in the last under 2 minutes and you had a timeout and you were down by 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, you knew you were going to score. I mean, we were positive we were going to score. And it didn't take but into probably 2 or 3 plays into that drive, the guys on the other side were pretty sure you were going to score. And you could see it in their eyes. They were like, "What do you do to this guy?" Because he had uncanny anticipation, uncanny accuracy, and he processed so fast. That, unfortunately, is one of the things you don't hear enough about quarterbacks these days, is how they process an offense and how they, take that knowledge and transfer that into, actually how they run the team, right, and where the ball goes. And there's nobody I've ever seen better than Joe. Brady's close.
Yeah, Tom Brady.
But they haven't hit him since the 8th grade picnic. So that's why he's lasted 22 years. Nobody's touched him.
It's amazing what he's doing in his career. Obviously, looking for an.
Hell, nobody's hit him.
Yeah,
nobody's hit him. Last time he got hit was when they ruled what they call that, the tuck in the game in the snow against the Raiders, I think. Yeah, otherwise, nobody hits that guy. No. That's why he's lasted this long. And to the NFL's credit in general.
Yeah.
You know, they've taken care of the quarterbacks, and they've made the game a hell of a lot safer than it used to be, because it wasn't really safe for a long time.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about your 3 Super Bowl runs. Obviously, I forgot to mention Jerry Rice was part of it too, and the legend receiver. I love the way he played the game, and obviously one of the best receivers that you played with. So what was it like going through these 3 Super Bowl runs with the team, and what did Bill Walsh say to you guys? Like, what was his message and the whole coaching staff message to you guys when he made these 3 Super Bowl runs?
It was all different from that standpoint, because every team is different.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's different personalities. And that was all great coaches are excellent motivators, but not necessarily group motivators. You know, they specialize. They can go to individual players. They know which buttons to push, and, you know, how to appeal to these guys. You mentioned Jerry Rice just real fast. That's the greatest football player that's ever played the game.
Yeah.
He is the GOAT. I know he's got a new sports drink, and it's called Goat Fuel, but he is the GOAT.
Yeah. That
guy, it's not close. People that don't think so have just forgotten. You know, it's always entertaining when some of these young receivers that are doing some really cool things. You know, you see the stats say he's the youngest receiver to ever have 500 catches and, you know, 7,000 yards or 6,000 yards. And it's like, yeah, it's really impressive. Look at the stats. Look at what he did. You know, back in the day, the touchdown record for the NFL, I want to say, God, what was the guy's name? Don Hudson from Green Bay, back in forevermore back. I mean, we're talking before World War II, I think, back.
Wow.
During his career, he had like 90 something touchdowns. Well, Steve Largent broke that record, and then Jerry just obliterated it. He did that with most of the other records for receivers. But, you know, that's smart. One of the smartest things Bill Walsh ever did. He moved up to the spot that year in the draft to grab Jerry. And, you know, Jerry was still pretty rough. Best thing I've ever thought, you know, happened to Jerry was playing with Roger Craig, because Roger was one of those workout maniacs. And Jerry was probably working out like a maniac as it was, but he found out a whole different level of maniac when he met Roger. And Roger was the first one to run those fire trails and, you know, morning workout, afternoon workout, all that stuff. That's and Jerry did it for all 20 something years he played. He was just incredible, just what he could do to a defense. Nobody else could do that. Even wide receivers, you know, would admit it. You know, what was it? Curtis Conway? I was at a football clinic, and Jerry, he might have retired by then, because he'd had the knee problem and stuff at the end of his career, but he's showing these young guys how to get off the line and run a little post. So they're running these things, and they're planning and cutting and going, and it looks kind of, and Jerry's going, no. You don't slow down when you run a route. You just cut and you go, but the speed shouldn't change.
Right.
And he gets up there and he says, let me show you. He gets up there, that foot goes in the ground, and he is like gone, like a shot. And, you know, receivers, Curtis Conway sitting back there, and he's shaking his head, and these kids were all looking over at him, and he goes, don't look at me. I can't even do that too. You know, Jerry was different. He still is different. He's the most conditioned. You know, he's in better shape than most 30-year-olds that are still in the NFL.
Man, and he can still play. In my opinion, I think he can still play in the league.
Yeah, he'd probably get a few reps in.
But I think, but his son, he's a great receiver coming up too. One of his sons, I've seen on Instagram. One of his sons, he's a receiver too. So I think that'll be the next great receiver, I think.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, out of all the 3 Super Bowls, which one was the most memorable one that you've been a part of?
Well, I get
Obviously,
that
all
all the
three,
time.
but
I get asked that all the time. And I always tell people, I've got 3 kids too. So it's kind of like picking out who's your favorite kid. There's no right answer. But I will say this, the first Super Bowl was the first one.
right.
And that's forever that's special just because, hell, especially for us, we were so bad, lost so much. The second one was the best team I ever played on that won a Super Bowl. And the third one was my last game, was Super Bowl 23. So, which one was that? I mean, I'd be honest, the 84 team that beat Dan Marino and the Dolphins in Stanford, we would have beat a whole bunch of different teams. In fact, when they did one of those round robin things through the ages, that was the team that ended up, going the farthest of all the Niner teams.
Yeah. So now looking back at your career, and how grateful are you to be in this position to be able to play the game that you love and staying in your hometown and UCLA near your hometown and winning 3 Super Bowl rings and then putting up all these numbers, accolades, and you deserve, in my opinion, you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Do you believe so?
I'm a bit biased, so I'll say that. Hey, if I learned anything, especially early on in my career when we weren't very good, it was to worry about the things you can control.
Mm-hmm.
Can't worry about having a crappy quarterback, can't worry about having bad defensive linemen, can't worry about having DBs that can't cover. Only thing I could control was what I did. So I have absolutely no control nor input in that kind of stuff. So, I don't, to be honest, I don't spend much time worrying about it. I don't spend much time, lobbying about it or talking about it. Just, hey, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, that's okay too.
Yeah. So before we get to the other things that you do, where do you keep? I don't know if you tell people this, but where do you keep your 3 Super Bowl rings?
Well, I've got a safety deposit box at the bank, and I've got a pretty heavy safe. So between those 2 places, they're there. So if you want one, guess right.
Yeah. So now, obviously, transitioning from your career, obviously you're a broadcaster now, analyst, and also you have your own podcast too. So what's it like? What's it like now transitioning and covering the game from a different aspect and covering these players and seeing these young talent develop and then learning the game of football too?
Yeah, I mean, it's been. I mean, I have no delusions. I've basically had 2 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Since high school, including I was going to school, but my job was to play football. And then when I was done playing football, after 21 years of doing it, I got a job where I talked about football and I covered football. So I've done that since '89. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it if you can do it. I did the NFL for a healthy 20 years. In the last 12 or so, I've done college football. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I do my own podcast, and that lives at all the normal places, website wise, but also at randycross.com. Mm-hmm. But I started doing radio and TV when I was still playing.
Oh, okay.
I started in about 82, 83 was radio for 3 years. And then I started doing radio. I had radio and TV shows locally. And then towards the end of my career, I don't know if you remember the USFL, but I was doing home games for the Oakland Invaders on TV as an analyst while I was still playing, which was an invaluable lesson to be able to do that. So by the time I got to CBS in '89, I'd already actually done games. Not necessarily great, but I knew kind of the mechanics. And probably the most important thing for doing that was when we got in the first seminar meeting and they started talking about sports TV, I knew some of the terms. Because if you're not around that at all, and you go into meetings like that where you're talking, network TV guys are talking about camera angles and equipment and all this other stuff, it sounds like they're speaking Martian. And there's no there's no clinic you can go to learn. Nowadays, they have some of these boot camp things where current players can go and learn some of the basics about broadcasting. But back then, it was they hired you and they dropped you in the deep end of the pool. And if you swam, you swam. And if you didn't, good luck. You could do something else for the rest of your life. But yeah, it's that, like I said before, I have no delusions. I was pretty lucky just to have those two careers.
So before we get to the NFL draft in 2 days, I want to ask you about your podcast and how did that come about, and how's it like having the podcast, and how often do you have guests on your show?
I've done it now for 5 years, 5 seasons. And initially I did guests probably half to 3/4 of the time. Otherwise I'd do topical stuff, and I did all sorts of different segments in my show. I was really lucky to have a producer who was really talented and had a great imagination. Mm-hmm. But now lately it's been mainly driven by interviews. And that's fine. I mean, I enjoy doing interviews. I enjoy being interviewed, and I enjoy, being an interviewer. So, you do enough of them, you kind of get used to the rhythm and the way they tend to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now, real quick, to the NFL draft. Obviously, a lot of things can happen here. But I just want to get to 2 teams. I'm a big Dallas Cowboy fan, and I want to ask you about the 49ers at 3, because that's going to be interesting what the 49ers do Thursday at number 3. What do you think they're going to do? Obviously, I believe Mac Jones is a smoke screen for that one, for 3. But what do you believe that the 49ers are really trying to do here at 3?
A smoke screen to take who?
Mac Jones?
No, I said the smoke screen is to not take Mac Jones and take somebody else.
Take somebody else, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think so. I think they're actually going to draft Mac Jones. Personally, I think he matches sort of what they want to do. I think I've got a really good friend that I used to do football clinics with, who has coached football forever. He's been a quarterback guy for, heck, I think he used to coach with Barry Switzer at Oklahoma.
Wow.
Give you a point of reference as far as it's been a while. He's been in the game, and he's worked with Mac Jones since Mac was 11. And he's happens to be of the opinion he's never seen a young quarterback that processed and did everything as well, smoothly and quickly as Mac does. And you could tell watching him in that Alabama offense. He's just not some slappy who happened to be able to hit all those windows to great receivers and great running backs, granted. But, the hard part's getting it there. The hard part isn't catching it. Mm-hmm. It's not easy to catch it, but the hard part's getting it there through a defense. And he has the ability to do that. Mm-hmm. And having said that, I think Zach Wilson has that same ability. Fields has the same ability. Trey Lance, we'll see. He's a guy that probably would use, a good year or so of sitting behind somebody, a veteran type, and really learning about the game and what to do. But again, I'll tell you, I think they're going to take Mac Jones. And, well, I don't believe, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan really care much about what, other ex-players think, what the online crew thinks, what, certain other people think. They're doing what they think is best for them. And I'd be with them. I'd be honest with you, of all the talent that's first round talent, there's 2 guys that really appeal to me besides a guy like Trevor Lawrence that I think could be really special. Penei Sewell, mm-hmm. the tackle from Oregon, I think could be really special, and Kyle Pitts. So, yeah, I think Kyle Pitts can be a game changer from the jump, depending on who he goes to. He's got to go to you got to go to a team that's got an offensive coach with some imagination. If you got that, he's the perfect Swiss Army knife. He's the best tight end tool the league has seen since Shannon Sharp.
Wow.
Bar none. Better than any of those other guys you can think of. He's faster, he's quicker, he's a unbelievable man up type matchup. He uses his hands really well. He's got incredible hands, quick feet. I mean, he's got everything. I think he's really, really something. So, I mean, hell, I wouldn't mind if the Niners took him at 3 and matched him up with George Kittle.
Yeah, that'd be. Yeah. So before we get to the last two things, so I'm a big Cowboy fan, and obviously a lot of names are being thrown out there for them at 10 with Slater, Rashawn Slater from Northwestern, Penei Sewell, Surtain, and Michael Parsons. But obviously the Cowboys need defense. But if Slater's still there, would you take him at that point?
If Slater's still there, yeah. I mean, Slater, there's a chance. Micah Parsons, maybe. I think he's going to be closer to that 5, 6, 7 area. And Penei Sewell, like I just said, he should be off the board pretty early. He may not be because there may be, there's always a run on something. Besides, everybody talks about all 5 quarterbacks going in the top 10. It might happen.
Yeah.
But there's going to be, besides those 5 quarterbacks, there's going to be 3 wide receivers. So that doesn't leave much breathing space for other positions. And that's what a lot of people don't really quite grasp.
Yeah.
Especially players, because their agents are all telling them they're, between 10 and 30. So right now there are probably, I don't know, a couple hundred guys that all think they're first round draft picks. And, there's probably 50 or 60 of those guys that they might have said you'll get in the second round, maybe day 2. And the reality is, because of how many positions there are, some of those positions get just flat left out until day 2. They don't even get drafted. So, Dallas, I would wish a Pitts on them, but he won't get that low. I would wish a Sewell on them, but he won't get that low. So maybe Micah makes it. There's a chance that might happen. And Slater, who's arguably the second best lineman in the draft, he probably will still be there at 10.
So the last two things here, our team is part of the Hugh Jackson Foundation. We're trying to help him prevent human trafficking and making sure the community is safe and the kids are safe. And obviously he's now the offensive coordinator at Tennessee State with Eddie George. So, but I'm gonna send you that page so you can check out the foundation. And we're really we're really grateful to be part of it. And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers?
Well, just thank you. Thank you for giving up a year of your life. And not enough people say thank you to them. So yeah, that would be it. Just thank you so much for what you've done and what you've given up over this last year or so. And congratulations to you for being involved with Hugh.
Yeah, thank you.
And that cause, because if we've learned something over these last several months, there are some special kinds of sick puppies out there.
Yeah.
All over the world, but especially here in America, that just prey on that kind of stuff. And the more we can do of eliminating that, the better. I mean, it is terrible. And kudos to you for getting involved, because it ain't you. That's one of those things that isn't hard. It's hard to speak up and raise your hand.
Yeah.
Because everybody, for some reason, people don't want to do it because they say, oh, what will other people think? But that's one of the things. If anybody thinks that's a bad thing to raise your hand, then they are 2 things, either complete morons or part of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And there it is. That wraps up episode 769 with 3-time Super Bowl champ, 3-time Pro Bowler from the San Francisco 49ers, Randy Cross. I just want to say thank you for joining the show. It's truly an honor, and keep up the great work, and enjoy the draft on Thursday, and you and your family stay safe.
Thank you. Another 769 episodes. Give me a call.
Yeah, actually, we would love to have you back as a returning guest at some point. So
sure, no problem.
All right, thank you.